Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurkan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be reviewing Anthem. Now, this is going to be divided into 9 different sections to try and provide you guys with as much context as possible, because I realize that right now there's a lot of people out there that are on the fence. There's also a lot of hatred being lobbied at the game, and I want to present the game. I want to tell you what has been done right in Anthem and what has been done wrong in Anthem, and that is going to require quite an extensive video. Now, having said that, I'm not going to be spoiling anything at all. As a matter of fact, most of the B-roll that you will be seeing in this review is going to be just me in the Colossus, running through the world, killing stuff, doing contracts, and potentially showcasing the very first stronghold that you get in the game, because that is the same stronghold that was present in the demos. So you guys most likely have already seen that. It is also the same stronghold that shows up in the very first gameplay that was ever shown of the game. So there's not really going to be any spoilers there, okay? I will also show some footage of Fort Tarsus, but none of the NPC dialogues, because I consider those to be somewhat spoilery. So the 9 sections that the video is going to be divided in are: is it worth it? That is going to be a brief overview that I will do just for the people that don't really want to listen to the whole damn video, because I understand there's a lot of people out there that just want to get their information as fast and as quickly as possible and aren't that interested in the in-depth analysis of every system. Then we'll briefly talk about visuals and sound. There's not a whole lot to say here because I've talked about this at length in previous videos. We'll talk about the gameplay and the gameplay loop. We'll talk about the customization of the javelins, the microtransactions, the story without spoiling. So I'm going to be talking about things like the structure of the story, how I feel about the story, all of those things. We're going to be talking about the current endgame, and it is important to mention that I'm going to be analyzing it based on what is in the game right now. Naturally, this is a live service, so therefore there's going to be more things added in the future. We're going to be talking about the problems. Now, this is a section that I put just to kind of like talk about annoyances that happen in the game, like the loading screens and the fact that there isn't a stats screen, and I'll talk more about it at length in that section. And finally, a conclusion where I will tell you where I am at after all of the things that I've experienced in the game itself. I will be putting timestamps on the pinned comment in this video so that you guys can navigate between the different sections of the video if you just want to skip to something specific, like you just want to hear about the gameplay or the customization or whatever. And if I forget to put that in the pinned comment, please remind me in the comment sections. I'll be sure to do it. So having said all of that, let's begin. Is it worth it? Well, if you're looking for a BioWare story expecting to get something like a Mass Effect with co-op options, then no, it's not worth it, because the story is not going to give you the same payoff that you would get from something like a Mass Effect. The story in this game is actually quite linear, with a couple of dialogue choices that I will get into more detail further in the video, but the dialogue choices are not as relevant as they have been in the past with other BioWare titles. So in short, if what you are trying to get out of this is a co-op Mass Effect, no, the game is not worth your time. This is not what you're getting. However, if you are looking for a looter shooter where you get to play as Iron Man, then yes, it is worth it. And I know that a lot of people are going to hear this and you're going to flip your shit, because it's not popular to like Anthem, and how can I like Anthem, and I'm an EA shill, and yada yada yada. And to be completely honest, I just don't care. Throughout my coverage of Anthem, I've been called both an EA shill as well as a hate monger for the game, and sometimes it even happens in the same damn video, which I find particularly impressive, that I can be both a shill and a hater for this game in the same video. Let me just tell you guys something very, very simple when it comes to my channel. I've never once allowed popular opinion to dictate my content, and I'm not about to do it now. I realize it's extremely popular and a very easy way to get views right now, to just say, oh, Anthem sucks, and it's this, and it's terrible, and it's all that stuff. But I quite simply do not agree with everything that it is being said. Now, having said that, Anthem is definitely a flawed game, and it was hands down rushed out of the door. Like, at this point in time, I have no doubt whatsoever that this was the case. And I'm saying this as someone who has played through the entirety of the main campaign. I've done every single side activity with the exception of the final set of tasks, because once you actually finish the game, They give you a set of tasks like an objective, something to work towards, like complete 25 strongholds, complete, what was the other thing? 25 quick play sessions, and a bunch of more stuff like that. I haven't finished that yet because I only finished the game like yesterday or whatever. And I've also run through every single NPC dialogue in the game. You know, those dialogues that BioWare has said, you know, our world, your story, all that stuff. I've done all of those dialogues at this point. And it took me a little over 30 hours to both complete the main campaign, the dialogues, the side activities in the current version of the game, and this is with me playing only one Javelin. I've played through the entirety of the story as the Colossus because the Colossus is just like, I really like playing as the Colossus, and I saw no reason to try any of the other Javelins out. I'm considering that when the PlayStation 4 version comes out, I'm probably going to be playing as the Ranger, which is another Javelin that I remember really enjoying in the demo, so it's going to feel a little bit fresher there, so that's another reason why I avoided playing with other Javelins. But anyway, in an ideal world, yes, I do think there definitely should have been more content at launch. Live service or not, promises of future content aren't going to magically extend what is in the game right now. And if that 30-hour number scares you, you shouldn't buy the game right now. Because I know that there are definitely going to be some people that are going to hit that 30-hour mark, get to the endgame grind, and you're going to find yourselves burnt out. Looter shooters, quite simply, are not for everyone, and this game is a looter shooter. Now, Anthem, despite all of its flaws, still provides players with an experience that you can't really get anywhere else. And I can already hear you guys typing out Warframe, Destiny, The Division, etc. And while all of these are titles within the same genre, I firmly believe each of them provides a unique experience within their own right. Warframe gives you the fantasy of being a space ninja with its unique acrobatic traversal mechanics. Destiny has hands down the best gunplay that I've ever experienced. The Division provides you with a more grounded setting and a great cover-based combat. Now, Anthem, to me, it's all about the flight. That magical moment when you jump in the air, engage your thrusters, and just start flying. And I know, it's something incredibly simple, but just like that, the world instantly becomes your playground. This is a mechanic that simply just clicks. The mobility that the flight mechanics bring to the table feels great, and then you add to that the game's satisfying combo system, the different javelins, the co-op actions, the extensive customization, and you get the foundations for a fantastic game. And therein lies Anthem's main problem. The foundation is indeed there. The potential for this title is undeniable, but the current execution is without a doubt lacking. Mainly lacking in a variety of content. As many have stated, myself included during the demos, most of the scenarios in-game can be boiled down to go here, kill these dudes, go there, hold this point. And as Mike Gamble himself said, pick up the thing and put it in the thing.
Trying to explain to our people what the mechanism is. You pick it up and then you put it in the thing. There.
But then again, I'm also someone who's played 1,200 hours of a game where your loop is hunt monster, craft gear, hunt more monster. And I'm not trying to compare these two games. They're incredibly different experiences, but the fact is, I enjoy the grind. I enjoy discovering different playstyles and the ways in which I can combine different equipment and gear to become a more efficient killing machine. So now that I've given you a basic overlook as to how I feel about the game, let's dive a little deeper. Visuals and sound. Now, I already talked at length when it comes to the visuals of Anthem in previous videos, so there isn't really much to add here. I still think the game looks beautiful. I love the art. I love the javelin details, the special effects, the animations. I think it's all top-notch. And to top it off, the performance on PC has been greatly improved with the Day 1 patch, which was actually applied last night, and I've gotten to play a little bit of the game since then to test that stuff out. Now, the footage that you guys are watching, I'm going to be giving you you all of the details on the hardware that I'm using right now, as well as the visual settings that I'm using for the game, so that you guys can kind of like draw your own conclusions as to how you feel about it. I realize that this is not the most optimal thing, particularly when it comes to hardware, because my GPU is outdated and all of that stuff, but this is what I have to work with right now, and this is the only way that I can show you what the game looks like and how the game performs at this point. When it comes to sound, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I think the sound work of this game is impressive. The explosions, the thrusters, the gun sounds, though I mostly use the autocannon and grenade launchers, so I'm biased there. Maybe some of the guns don't sound as good. Like I remember hearing like one of the light machine guns just going duk, 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 and that didn't sound particularly appealing, but like the sounds of the autocannon is just like, I friggin' love it. And the explosion sounds, the special effects sounds, all of that stuff, super solid. The soundtrack is, in my opinion, also solid throughout the whole experience. However, the biggest problem with sound is that there is currently a nasty bug which sometimes causes users to lose all game sound. And no, it wasn't fully fixed with the last patch, which is unfortunate because like you got this really great sound system and then you have this glitch that happens every now and then and you can't really experience it. It is extremely frustrating. Gameplay. Flying through the world is awesome and quickly becomes second nature, to the point where I found myself trying to fly in other third-person games. Like, shortly after the demos were over, I remember logging back into Monster Hunter World, which is a game that I still play at length, and like one of the first things that I tried doing, just like because I had the muscle memory already built in, was I pressed the jump button and then try to push down on the left analog stick because that's how you essentially engage flight, and I was like, dumbass, you're playing a different game. Like, the traversal system of Anthem is just so intuitive and so satisfying that you find yourself wanting to do that in pretty much every other game. As a matter of fact, there's only been 2 other games up until this point that I've ever really enjoyed the traversal system as much as I enjoy an Anthem. Those 2 games are Spider-Man, which came out last year. You guys might have heard about that game. It was friggin' fantastic, and its traversal was just a joy. And then another game, a little bit less known, which was Gravity Rush. Gravity Rush also had a fantastic traversal system. I greatly enjoyed it. And Anthem now joins those 2 other games as some of my favorite methods of traversal within a video game. I really, really like it. The gunplay is good, but not all weapons feel great to fire, particularly in the early game when you're still trying to figure out, you know, what weapon you want to use, what abilities you want to use, and all that. You will find yourself mostly relying on abilities to actually kill enemies because the weapons do feel underpowered and they just feel like they lack that oomph of actually firing a weapon. Now, in my specific case with the Colossus, the first weapon they give you is the Cloudburst autocannon, which is, in my opinion, the worst autocannon of the bunch because it just like the spread of the autocannon is insane. It does fire fast, but it spreads bullets all over the place, makes it hard if you actually utilize it. However, once you start testing out other weapons within the same type, you might find that you will enjoy specific weapon types. Like in my case, it was the Torrent and the Mauler inside the autocannon. I love those 2, but the Cloudburst, I just don't like it all that much. And you will find yourself in the same position. You're going to be like, okay, I like the way this gun fires. This gun, however, I don't really care that much about it, and it is going to vary from player to player, but the interesting thing is going to be once you start getting into the end game and you actually start finding better versions of these weapons, particularly masterwork versions of these weapons, they're going to have perks attached to them that are going to change the way in which each gun actually feels, and that is when the gunplay is going to feel at its best. However, I would still advise you throughout most of the game to focus more on the abilities and gear of your Javelin and not as much on the weapons, unless you're the Ranger. You're going to have to use a lot of weapons if you're the Ranger, because I seem to remember the Ranger relying a whole lot more on weapons than necessarily just on its abilities. Anyway, the abilities or gear are fun to play around with to figure out your own preferred playstyle. And once you get to the end game, again, I know that I keep saying once you get to the end game, it gets a lot better because they add in an additional layer in the form of masterwork items, which brings additional perks to the mix, which will keep you engaged if you enjoy min-maxing your character. Now, a good example of this is the video that I posted yesterday. You guys might want to check that out, where I show you the lightning coil flamethrower build with a couple of masterworked items mixed in, and that gives you an idea of just how much more depth there is to the system once you start engaging with masterwork perks. That's not to say that it doesn't get fun until you get to endgame, because there's still a lot of fun in figuring out, oh, I'll try combining these two abilities to get combos, or these two abilities, and you might even go in with 2 detonators and have a friend that goes in with 2 primers and combine your abilities that way. There's a lot of fun in figuring that stuff out. And that is one of the things that I really enjoy, you know, the min-maxing of my character, the figuring out the most optimal way to actually play. And it's just good stuff if you enjoy the min-maxing aspects of these games. The combination of the gun's abilities and javelin mobility makes for a really fun combat. It's just particularly, I cannot emphasize javelin mobility enough, because there's no longer that whole thing where it's like, oh, they've spawned this wave of enemies and I got to make sure that I killed this guy, or I got to go this way, and in order to flank these dudes, I have to kill these other dudes. No, dude, you can fly. You can literally just at any point, just like, screw the rules, I'm flying behind you, or screw the rules, I'm jumping in there, casting my ultimate and just destroying everything. There's an amazing power fantasy here that really isn't anywhere else in any other game that I've played. At least from my personal experience with the game. Take that as you will. However, as I mentioned in the introduction portion of this video, the missions do lack variety. And whereas during the main campaign, the story will kind of act like the driving force behind your actions, during free play, contracts, and strongholds, and other side activities, you'll be mostly driven by the loot chase. And if you're not someone who enjoys that chase, then this game is definitely not for you. Customization. Javelin customization is great. You get a full color wheel and several material types to completely change the look of your javelin. Swapping materials around is great because you get to decide things like the texture, reflectiveness, patterns, and color of individual javelin parts. And on top of that, you can even add an additional layer of flavor by giving your javelin a more damaged look, like if it's been through battle. However, currently all the cosmetic options that you get in terms of armor pieces come from the game shop and not in-game loot. And you guys are like, what are you talking about? We can only buy armor pieces? The thing about Anthem, for those of you that still don't know this, is that the armor pieces that you get are always cosmetic. There's a whole system for you to get your stats in, which is called components, and you can only get components from in-game loot, and that is essentially what kind of like replaces the stats portion of your armor, and therefore all of the armor that you can get for your javelin is going to be strictly cosmetic. And like I said, currently all of those things are in the in-game shop. However, you can buy everything from the in-game shop with in-game currency that you gain by just playing the game. There's also been mention recently on a live stream that there's going to be stronghold-specific cosmetic gear in a future patch. What does this mean? You're going to be able to get armors from specific strongholds. These are going to be cosmetic armors, and you're only going to be able to get those by actually playing the game, by actually running those strongholds, and by collecting that specific loot. You're going to need keys, which are going to come from doing daily challenges and stuff like that, and then you're going to take those keys onto the stronghold. You're going to open up the chests in those strongholds, and you're going to get specific armor from that stronghold, which is going to be cosmetic. Microtransactions. Since I just mentioned the store, it only seems appropriate that I would segue into the topic of talking about microtransactions. And in most games, I don't really interact with microtransactions all that much. If I can earn the items I want through play, I'll go for that. And as it stands right now, I've made enough coin in game to buy pretty much anything that I want from the shop. There just hasn't really been anything there I actually wanted. Now, I know that you guys are probably going to say, oh, but Rurikhan, you had that bug where you got the additional coins. And yes, I have 80,000 more coins than I was supposed to have. Some people even got more than that because of a bug that happened when you logged into the game for the very first time. And it is my understanding that they're not going to take those coins away, which basically means that there's a lot of players out there right now that have more coin than what they should have. But even if you take that coin away, I can still get whatever I wanted from the shop. There just wasn't really anything there that I was like, oh, I gotta have this one thing. So, one of the things that I definitely don't like about the microtransaction store is that it uses the fake currency model. Now, bear in mind that pretty much every single game that I can think of right now that has an in-game store uses this fake currency model. What does this mean? It means that you have to actually put money in, and then they give you fake money in-game so that you can buy your stuff that way. What that means is that you can't just say for instance, the armors that you can get right now in the game, they cost $8.50. You can't actually get $8.50 worth of the in-game currency. You have to get $10 or something like that, right? And then you're left with a bunch of in-game currency that you might not want to actually use. That is to keep you engaged with that particular currency. That is so that you feel like, hey, I already have this much invested, I should get some more. And that's just a system that I personally don't like. But most of the games that use these types of microtransaction shops do use that system, so it's not something that I'm particularly surprised with. Ultimately, I haven't really seen anything overly egregious at this point with the store. The biggest concern is the rate at which you will earn coin once you run through all the challenges in the game. Because the way that you get coin is you do challenges like, hey, get 10 headshots, or hey, kill 10 enemies with a grenade launcher, or hey, kill 10 enemies with a machine gun. There's a bunch of stuff like this. Do 10 strongholds, do 10 world events, and you get coin by doing those things. So the concern is what happens once you complete all of those? Is there a limited number of coin that I can earn? And right now, there's something that they do every day and every week and every month, which is your daily challenges, your weekly challenges, and your monthly challenges. These are repeatable challenges that you can basically do forever, but I still don't know exactly what the coin earn rate is going to be moving forward because, I've still just gotten to Endgame, and as such, I need to get a better grasp on how that system actually feels like. There's also a system in place called the Alliance system, which basically means that your top 5 friends that are contributing to your alliance, these are people that are in your friends list and that you've played together with them. Those people are going to be contributing coin for you as they play the game, and you contribute coin for them as you play the game. And this gives you a weekly amount of coin that you get for simply playing the game. Same thing with the challenges. You can do challenges while you are playing the game, so you're constantly getting coin. But at this point in time, I feel that it is extremely early to judge how fair it is, all of that coin that you get. Like I said, I got a ton of coin right now. That's because I've just gotten started with the game and I've done a bunch of the challenges just by naturally playing the game. Whether or not that is going to be something that is going to be continuing throughout the following months is something that we will only know in the future. So I will in the future report more about this. But as it stands right now, the shop doesn't really bother me all that much. I understand there's a lot of people, $8 microtransactions in a fully priced game, and I agree. It's garbage, but that's kind of the way that these games work nowadays. And at the same time, you also have to remember that every piece of future DLC is going to be free in this game. So whereas for instance, in Destiny, you actually have to buy the Forsaken expansion and whatever comes after the Forsaken expansion, and you have to buy the Trials of Osiris and the thing that came after that, and all of that basically means that in order for you to get into Destiny right now, Destiny 2, for instance, you would have to get $100 or something like that. And in this game, say you play the start of it and you're you got bored, and then a year from now they improve it, you're oh, I can come back and I can play the game. That's the reason why that microtransaction store is there. And some people can deal with it, some people can't deal with it. I'm not going to judge you either way. I'm just reporting things the way that they are and how I feel about it. And in my personal taste right now, it hasn't really bothered me that much. If it gets worse, I'll be sure to report on it. Story. Now, do remember that I'm not going to be bringing up any spoilers whatsoever in this video, so we're going to be discussing the structure of the story, how I felt about the story, and those kinds of things, and not like the narrative itself to prevent spoilers for people that still want to actually enjoy the game. So when it comes to the story of Anthem, I enjoyed it. However, the method of delivery was not the best, and it could have been done a hell of a lot better. You see, Anthem is trying to tell two stories, and these stories actually complement each other really well. There's the story of the Heart of Rage Cataclysm, which is your main campaign, and there's the story of Fort Tarsis. Now, the Heart of Rage has a clear objective you work towards as you play the game, but the tale of Fort Tarsis is more scattered. It is told through NPC interactions that provide additional flavor to the world. And while there are dialogue choices during these interactions, the consequences have no real impact in the Heart of Rage narrative. The narratives of Fort Tarsis exist to add flavor, for world building, if you will, and some I found quite enjoyable. Others, not so much. The problem, however, is in the delivery, particularly in a multiplayer setting. I mean, after you team up with friends, the last thing you'll want to do is come back from a mission and then go talk to NPCs. And you don't have to do this. You can go through the main campaign or do a bunch of side activities with friends and return later to experience the Fort Tarsis dialogues. However, beelining through the main narrative like this without experiencing the Fort Tarsis narrative will make for a much less enjoyable experience, and you will not have an accurate notion of the breadth of the world of Anthem. The best way to experience the story is without a doubt to listen to the Tarsis dialogues as soon as they appear each time you come back from a mission, but this creates a pacing problem in a multiplayer game, and this is an aspect I feel BioWare was unable to properly solve, and one of the main reasons why I played large portions of the game completely solo. I actually wish they would have taken the tried and true method of just having a cutscene before you do a mission, then do the mission, and then have a cutscene at the end of that mission. And I think a majority of players would agree with me. The few cutscenes that happen during the main campaign missions are some of the best in the game. I just wish there were more. And finally, one of my biggest criticisms to the story of Anthem has to be the final cutscene. While I enjoyed the story overall, the ending cinematic was extremely disappointing. Without going into spoilers, let's just say the whole campaign is building you up to this final moment, like this crescendo happening as you are playing each of the campaign missions. And then suddenly and unexpectedly, it just ends. It ends too fast and everything gets neatly wrapped up and the characters are off to their next adventure within the span of a few short minutes. It literally felt to me like they had a much longer final scene planned and suddenly ran out of budget and had to wrap everything up then and there, which really is a shame because the foundation for the world and the story to go to really interesting places is there. You can friggin' sense it. Something that would have taken the narrative from an I enjoyed it to an it was fucking amazing. The potential was there to really take that story into a much more interesting direction. But instead, they chose to, hey, let's just end this episode right here and move things along to the next episode. And they kind of present you with the next plot point, which will most likely show up in future DLC. And the world that they've built is ripe for storytelling. And in a lot of ways, I really hope that they get to do another story as big as the campaign that we've experienced, but hopefully they'll take it in more unpredictable directions and not just have a cookie cutter story like the one that we have here. There are a couple of loose ends that weren't tied up, and I can see certain characters making a comeback in the future of the franchise, but at the same time, what I want to see from BioWare is I want to see them take more risks with this story, you know? It doesn't have to be as basic as this was. Endgame. Once you finish the main campaign, you will have a couple of options in terms of the content you can pursue. Naturally, there's all the side content you might have left behind. However, your primary goal should be to get to max level as fast as possible, because Grandmaster difficulty will only unlock at level 30, and that's where you'll want to be for the best rewards. In fact, I would even argue there's a bit of a lull between the levels 24 and 30, because at that point, you will most likely have completed the campaign and most of the side activities, and you'll want to start the real grind, but you can't because the loot table on hard is limited in terms of masterwork items. But you can't do Grandmaster 1 yet because you're not high enough level. So essentially, you're leveling up but barely improving your gear along the way until you reach that level 30. However, once you reach level 30 and unlock Grandmaster difficulty, your options are going to be contracts, which are going to come in normal and legendary variety, free play, and strongholds. And now that I've actually played a significant portion of the game, I can actually say that free play is by far my least favorite mode. I would only willingly go into free play if I was just feeling like flying around and exploring the world. I would never go there with the intention of actually hunting for loot. World events never spawn at what I would consider an acceptable rate. There's no indicator in your map, so you literally have to hope that you fly near one of the world events in order for it to actually appear and for you to be kind of like called to that particular world event. Random treasure chests were being exploited and therefore got nerfed into the dirt, and there just isn't much incentive to hang out in free play right now unless you're running with a full group with a specific objective in mind, like maybe you have a daily activity to go and run world events or something along that nature. But other than that, there's just not that much reason to go and hang out in free play, at least from my experience with the game up until this point. Contracts are essentially missions where you'll be giving a set of 3 or 4 random tasks, and there's a decent set of rewards as well as reputation gains upon completion. Reputation unlocks things like blueprints and some cosmetic materials. Contracts will also come in legendary form, which is the same thing but harder and with better rewards. And finally, strongholds. They're your dungeons. However, on Grandmaster, they become considerably more challenging, the hardest content currently available, so you're expected to farm contracts and free play before jumping into Grandmaster strongholds. And in the current iteration of the game, that's it. It is in fact not a lot of content. While contracts are essentially limitless, the pool of activities isn't, and you'll notice the repetition pretty fast. World events and free play also tend to repeat themselves after a while, and strongholds, well, there's only 3 of them, so you can imagine that those can get pretty repetitive pretty fast as well. Now, naturally, we haven't seen cataclysms yet, so that's an activity I'll report on later, and we don't know exactly how much content they'll add with the Evolving World update. We do know, however, there's another stronghold coming soonish, but that's about it. The problems. This section of the video is to address a lot of issues that the game still has that really don't fit into any of the other categories that I've discussed up until this point. And the very first thing that we got to talk about is the Tomb of the Legionnaires mission. Now, the reason I want to address this particular topic is because there's so many people that have been talking about it. However, since the day 1 patch has been implemented, I believe that this is no longer a real issue, because the problem with this was you would get to a point in the campaign where suddenly they would give you a set of tasks like go and open 15 chests, go and find 10 collectible items, go and kill 20 enemies with a headshot, something like that. And it was just like a long list of tasks of things that you had to do. And the biggest problem with this is that it wouldn't take into account all the things that you would have done up until that point. It would just begin counting once you receive that specific task. And the way in which they supposedly fix it, I've read in the patch notes. I haven't gotten to experience it yet because I've already done this the old school way before it was nerfed. The way they fix it is that they just enable that all of the checklist things that you need to do for this mission actually begin counting from level 3 onwards, which in my particular case, had that been the way that it would work, basically when I got to this checkpoint, I would have done literally everything that was required in order for me to go inside the tombs and continue on with the main quest. I should also mention that despite all of the complaints that I've seen about this, I literally did everything that was required in less than 2 hours. And I understand it was a bummer because like you're going on this roller coaster ride with the campaign and so it's like, hey, everybody stop, everybody get out, and get on this line before you can get back on the roller coaster ride. That's exactly how it feels, and I understand that it's particularly egregious, and in 2019 really shouldn't be a mechanic that you put in a game, but I also feel like the outrage that came out of it was extremely exaggerated. But, you know, it's whatever. People are going to think about things the way that they think about things. Another problem, Loading Screen Simulator 2019. There's a lot of loading screens, and no, the day one patch doesn't fix everything. So the day one patch does improve loading times and performance in general on non-SSD drives, but there are still tons of loading screens, and quite frankly, I don't know how they can fix that. Now, the reason why this probably doesn't bother me as much as it bothers everybody else is because, again, I come from Monster Hunter World, and in Monster Hunter, you're kind of used to, I'm in town, I pick up the quest, I go outside, loading screen. I kill the monster, and then I go back to town, loading screen. You know, I'm used to that kind of loop, so it doesn't bother me that much personally, but I can understand that it will bother a lot of people, and particularly because the loading wasn't optimized. But the day one patch did optimize loading, and I've already heard from several of the Iron Breakers that the loading times are faster even if you don't have an SSD drive. And the whole notion that I've heard some journalists are saying you should just get an SSD, they're cheap now, that's fucking dumb, okay? You're a fucking idiot if that's what you think. Like, it's like, why don't people have SSDs in 2019? Fuck you, not everybody has money. Respect people that maybe don't have as much as you have, you privileged prick. Okay, that's where I stand with the journalists that were telling you that you should get an SSD drive, just to make things clear, okay? And I'm pretty sure that BioWare feels the same way, because even Mike Gamble said this was a problem, this is on our end, and we need to fix it. And supposedly they fixed it. It's faster now, but again, there are still a lot of loading screens. There's a loading screen to go into your equipment section. There's a loading screen for when you come out of your equipment section. And then there's a loading screen for when you load into the mission. There's a loading screen if you want to go into the launch bay. So there's a ton of loading screens, and honestly, I don't know how they can fix that other than speeding those up and not having them be as long. But beyond the optimization sections, there's always going to be that feeling of disconnect that you're loading into something. Even when you're into free play, the whole world is not how should I put it? The whole world is not seamless. There are certain areas in free play that you actually load into. Specifically, these little mini dungeons that you have in free play, they're actually marked in the map, and you can go to those dungeons, but once you get there, there's a loading screen for you to actually get inside the dungeon. And once you come out, there's a loading screen for you coming outside of the dungeon. So I know that at some point they were selling this as an open world game, but let me tell you right now, Anthem is not an open world game. The structure of Anthem is you have an hub and then you have missions that you go on. It is not, and I repeat, it is not an open world game. Do not go into this expecting this to be an open world game. Movement in Fort Tarsis is still too slow. But hey, at least after the day one patch, I can actually tell when my character is running because the animation is made much more clear. Before the day one patch, I would basically have to look down to see the feet of my character moving to realize whether or not he was running because it was not that apparent. However, even with the current implementation of running, it is still a pain to go through Fort Tarsis. Sure, the location is beautiful from an aesthetic perspective, but at the same time, it does feel lifeless because there are NPCs there. There are interactions that you have with NPCs, but it doesn't feel like that initial trailer that you've seen of Fort Tarsis, okay? It doesn't feel like that at all. And so basically, you just want to get through it as fast as you possibly can. I understand developers want you to actually look around and see how pretty we've made this place, but the reality of it is, I think most people just don't care, BioWare. Just let us run faster. And by the way, I realize that some people are going to come at me, oh, but the movement is not going to be realistic if you move much faster than that. And let me tell you something. Are you honestly going to argue realism when you're playing a video game where you're Iron Man fighting alien creatures in suits that can conjure lightning from thin air? Sorry, your argument is invalid. Another thing that could greatly improve the Fort Tarsis experience is if you could launch expeditions from anywhere in Fort Tarsis. What do I mean by this? Well, right now there's a system that if you actually party up with someone, you can instantly go back to the launch expedition screen by simply holding down the Y button on your controller or whatever it happens to be in the melee button on your keyboard. I wish you could do that if you were solo. Because like a lot of the times I'll go into Fort Tarsis and like, oh, I got to go over here to pick up this contract. And you'll go there and then it's like, oh, now I have to slog all the way back. And there's nothing else for me to do from this point up until when I get to my javelin. And it just feels like a waste of time. So either let us run faster or let us launch expeditions from anywhere in Fort Tarsis, even if we're solo. Like, it's just some quality of life stuff that you need to have. The UI still needs a lot of work, in my opinion. I'm not talking about the combat UI. I'm talking about the UI outside of combat. So stuff like going into the map, going into the social section of the UI, and then going into the journal, going into the challenges. I feel like it's a bit of a mess. And the fact that you have two different sections that you can kind of go to. And I remember that in the demos, the PlayStation, for some reason, had things inverted from the PC. So you'd have to press the start button to go into your journal, and then you had to press the touchpad to go into the map. Whereas on PC, it would be the other way around. You'd press the start button to go into the map, and the share, not the share button, whatever it is, the secondary button on an Xbox controller to go into the journal. And it just feels like it's not fully fleshed out yet. And I think that there's a lot of improvement that can be made on the UI. And then being downed sucks. In the middle of the action, it's easy for your team to not notice that you've been down. There's no ping system to let people know that you're down, and there's no way to spectate your teammates while you're down. So basically, if you die, you're stuck looking at a big red graphic that might as well say, you suck, until someone comes around to repair you. And it's really frustrating, and it gets really boring, and I can understand why people are so upset about that. And finally, probably one of my biggest gripes is that the item descriptions are confusing. It's not always clear what each inscription does, and there's currently no stat screen where you can verify what your overall stats are so that you can actually see all of the bonuses from your gear, which really feels like a major oversight. Like, how can you have a game with a lot of RPG mechanics and not have a screen that I can just look at all of my stats? And this is not something that's going to come with the day one patch. This is something that the developers are still figuring out how they're going to do it. And again, it goes back into the whole aspect that the UI is a mess. They're probably looking at their UI and they're like, Jesus Christ, where the hell are we going to put a stat screen? Look at all the stuff that we already have in here. It's insane. Another thing that I feel is important is the fact that I wish there was an option for us to re-watch some of the cinematic cutscenes, and it is particularly important because I know of a lot of players that had a glitch that prevented them from seeing a very key cinematic in the game, and I hope not as many people experience that glitch anymore, but an easy fix would be to at least allow us to re-watch cinematics that have already taken place. And I don't think that should be something particularly hard to implement when you already have like a journal interface. You could just go like, hey, story moments. Just add an entry there that would let you re-watch the different cinematics that exist in the game. Again, I don't think that should be that hard. That's probably something that they can do. And finally, I would also like to bring up two I wouldn't say promises, but two features that were announced in the game that never really made it into the final version. One of those features is the Strider base, because they've said that you were supposed to have a Strider base during certain sections of the mission, and I even got excited about it because I had said, oh dude, it'd be great if we could like customize our Strider, have it be like our own our own little hub that we could place anywhere we wanted in the world, and it'd be cool to have that aspect of it. And right now, it feels very weird to see like cutscenes where you're inside the Strider, and there at the end of the cutscene, you're suddenly back in Fort Tarsis. I mean, it's just implied that, yeah, sure, I guess we rode the Strider back to Fort Tarsis, but ultimately, I think it would have been great if there was just like a small space where, hey, you're inside the Strider now until the next mission, and here's your basic functionalities that you need, like, customize your javelin or something else that you need to do that you could only do at Fort Tarsis, and then you can launch the mission from this section. There was a lot of potential for the Strider to be a much more involved aspect of the game, and quite simply, you just don't get Striders. And I know that the developers have specifically said, well, we traded Striders for the social hub, and I'm just like, no, that's not a good enough excuse. You need to do better than that. I'm sorry. Like, that social hub, by the way, kind of sucks. Sorry, man. It's like, I really don't like the social hub. But anyways, the Strider was one of the things that they said we're going to have and we were going to see in between missions. Never happened. Not really a big deal, but it is disappointing. And then finally, they also promised us that we were going to have an apartment in Fort Tarsis. Doesn't happen. You don't actually have an apartment in Fort Tarsis. Fort Tarsis is just quest hub and a place where you go to talk to NPCs. That's it. You don't actually have an apartment there, which, again, disappointing. I would have liked to have an apartment, my own little hub space that I could potentially even customize and decide, hey, I want to have this thing in my little hub. And again, this would be something that would be cool if, like, you could also have romance options with the NPCs, which we already know that we don't have. It's just a couple of things that could have really been made better and just kind of hammer on the point that the game was definitely rushed through development to be released earlier than it should. Conclusion. You shouldn't buy a game based on a promise. You should buy a game based on what's there at the time of purchase. Despite all of the shortcomings currently present in Anthem, it is still a unique experience that has been incredibly fun so far, and I intend to continue to play it and provide coverage on it. That doesn't mean that I'm telling you to buy it. The whole point of this video and the point of reviews in general should be to inform you of what is there, the good and the bad, so that you can make your own purchasing decision. Anthem isn't a perfect game, but it's not a pile of garbage either. Anthem is a game with a solid gameplay foundation and an incredible setting, an average story, and unfortunately a rushed release. If after everything I've said here you're still on the fence, you shouldn't buy the game. You should wait to see what the live service brings. But anyway, that is going to be it for this video. I would really appreciate all of your comments and feedback in the comment section down below. If this video helped you out in making a decision on whether you want to get Anthem now, later down the line, or never, then make sure to hit that like button because it helps me out a lot as well. Thank you all very much for watching. If you want to stay tuned to more content from me, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon, and I'll see you guys in the next one.